Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Bring a Trailer podcast. This is Randy Nonnenberg, co-founder of BAT. Really excited to be back with you. And today we have a really neat guest to chat with, Dan Bova. Dan Bova is with R&T Crew, which is the road and track affiliate publication for kids. And we're talking about kids and cars and getting kids into cars and what resonates with them these days, what's maybe the same as when we were all kids and getting into vehicles and that sort of thing, and what R&T Crew is doing to do that right now. So Dan, welcome. Thanks for joining.
Thank you, Randy. Great to be here.
Yeah, super psyched to talk to you about this. So let's first give a little overview to folks who may not know about what R&T Crew is. It's advertised in the Road and Track magazine and in some other places, and some people may have heard of it, but I bet a lot of people haven't heard of it. So can you give a super quick overview?
Yeah, absolutely. So R&T Crew, as Randy's deftly described, is it's think of it as the magazine is road and track for kids. But the cool part is that it comes in a subscription box. So we put it out 6 times a year. And you can see all the details at rtcrew.com. But it comes in a subscription box, and in that box, there'll be like a cool t-shirt. There'll be some toys. There's a lot of like STEM kind of themed projects they can put together. There'll be water bottles, a lot of fun stuff for kids to get them excited about cars, kids that love cars, but also just like projects that they can work on and have fun with. So it's a lot of fun.
So my kids are absolutely nuts for this. First of all, they're nuts for getting, mail. Whenever mail shows up and you're 7 years
exactly.
old, like you are like running around the house like you won the lottery, right? And so subscription boxes are similar. And obviously that whole business, we could talk about it. I mean, adult subscription boxes of whether it's clothes or, gadgets or whatever. Obviously, I think in maybe COVID, that kind of took off. So anyway, lots of layers to this, but there's a super cool, I'd call it a magazine. It's a little different than a car, modern road and track car magazine. But let's talk first off about the magazine that shows up with this thing, because I'm blown away by it. First of all, it's sort of thematic, right? Like each one that comes out, it has a theme, but then the content in it is really crazy. So let's talk about the themes first. What are you the one that picks those themes, or let's talk about what some of those themes have been that have maybe been your favorite?
Yeah, sure. So it's a group think. There's a couple of people involved, but some of the fun ones we've done in the past is like the snack attack issue, which the main story in there was an interview with Guy Fieri, who is a huge car collector, as you may know. So we talked about his cars and, obviously his show, Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives, and just how he goes about doing the show, driving his cars, all the kind of fun stuff that comes along with that. We did a Crushing It issue, and we interviewed a woman who broke the world record for the highest jump in a monster truck, and just like found out like what is going through your head when you're in this several ton vehicle soaring like 50 feet in the air. So it's a lot of kind of like talking to people who have like really super awesome jobs that just are doing like such cool stuff, but that's all comes back to cars. A guy who is a designer for Corvette, a woman scientist who is remote controlling the rover on Mars. So anything that has to do with cars and vehicles and wheels and just fun stuff. And then we always get into like silly things. Every issue we ask a silly question. So, why do dogs like to stick their heads out of cars when they're moving? Or what does a race car driver do when they have to pee in the middle of a race? So we find out those burning questions, Randy, that I know you've had, and we track down the answers for that. Well, so it's a combination of fun stuff, information, and then there's like puzzles and games and all that kind of stuff.
Well, I mean, this turns into my dinner table conversation, right? Because my kids see this thing and then they like want to tell me about what race car drivers do when they have to pee, right? So I get to hear about all of it. I'm like the 4th person in line in the family that gets to read the magazine. So anyway, I'm continually impressed by the just sort of creativity behind it and how you guys come up with this. And then Yeah, just want to talk to you about like what informs this stuff. Obviously, you as an editor are kind of picking and choosing and curating what goes into it and what doesn't, and what's your data point for that? I mean, is there like, child research that you're doing that's really sort of scientific, or are you guys just, whiteboarding, spitballing, like, you know what, there's no other, content like this for kids anywhere. Let's just do anything would be great. How do you go about that?
Well, luckily for me, me and so Patrick Carone, who works at Hearst Autos, luckily both of us are have the maturity of a fourth grader. So it's pretty easy for us to tap into what would a 10-year-old really like. So we haven't actually dove into like real data yet, but we are, as we get more subscribers, we're talking to them, we're hearing from them. So it's kind of this balancing act of finding out, parents, what do parents like, what do they want this magazine and this box to do? So part of that is to, just feed into their love of cars. A lot of people who subscribe to this are also subscribers to Road and Track magazine, or Car and Driver. So it's like, you see your kid pulling that magazine out of your hands and you want to give something that maybe is a little more focused to them. So it's a way for parents to like kind of share that love and get them more into it. And then, honestly, it's just about like being silly sometimes and having fun, or just like really finding out like those questions, like what does a race car driver do? Like, I mean, I can't go for 4 or 5 hours without having a pee. So. And Dale Earnhardt Jr., he was pretty out front. He said, hydration is actually more an issue. But if it's going to happen, he's like, you just go. You're a sweaty, disgusting mess anyway. What's the difference?
Oh man, Dale, too much information. Dale, I don't know. That didn't make it to my dinner table conversation. I'm kind of glad. But anyway, so I don't think there's anything else like this out there. I mean, my kids are a little younger than yours, and I've read them some really neat books, right? There's some cool car racing books. There's some cool sort of engineering minded books, like how do axles work and how does steering work and stuff like that. I'm an engineer in my background, so I love geeking out on that sort of stuff. But certainly from a sort of periodical sort of sense, I don't think there's anything out there like that at all. And then the box that arrives, which has, trading cards with cards with stats on them, and maybe a Matchbox or a Hot Wheels car in it, and other automotive sort of adjacent science stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, did you guys come up with this seeing some other example of it out there, or is this like sort of one of a kind?
I mean, honestly, I haven't seen anything like this exactly out there. There are surely, there's books like How Do Things Work and things like that. But what we really wanted to do was get all that information in there, like really feed into kids' curiosity, but also like just, as we've been talking, maybe it's apparent, but it's kind of fun. It's just like funny stuff. There's a lot of jokes. There's a lot of goofy stuff too. So, it's got sort of a Nickelodeon vibe, maybe you could say, but it also does like break down some stuff because, kids who are into cars, they'll read, oh, this is a V8, this is a V12, this has this much horsepower, but like, what do those words mean? So we can break it down in really kind of simple terms, like where did that term horsepower even come from? And what does it translate to? What's the difference between a V6 and a V12? Like, what does that mean? So it's kind of fun, personally, just for me, you just hear all these words all the time. And then you just like to dig into the history of like, why did they start calling it horsepower? Well, they started calling it that because at the time when they created this engine, horses were the main mode of work. So it was saying this thing could do the work of that many horses. And, now it's not quite the same. It's, a Bugatti is not doing the work of, 700 horses or something like that exactly. But it's just kind of fun to dig into that history. So it's as much fun to put together as hopefully it is to read.
Yeah, absolutely. And that sort of context, right? Those conversations that come out of that, it can be just one little snippet in the corner of one of the pages of the included print magazine, and it starts interesting conversations for me with my boy who's 11, or my daughter who's 8, or even my youngest who wants to fight over it, who's 4 years old. Right? She's peering
Right.
over everybody's shoulder, trying to play with the trading cards and figure out what's going on. What do you guys shoot for a particular age group with the kind of content that's in it?
So I'm glad to hear that your 4-year-old is gunning for it too, because I think the sweet spot of who we're going for is like 8 to 12, but that we hopefully, as I said, there's some games and puzzles in there that hopefully your 4-year-old can have some fun with. There's word searches and things like that. There's also just silly stuff like a picture of a car, being, dumping into a river, and we put like a funny caption, and then we have a contest. Hey, can you beat this caption? Like, send it in. So we're trying to put entry points for kids of all different ages. But we do have, and we have every issue, we have a spread where kids can send in drawings of cars that they've either invented or just cars that they love. And, some of those will range from a kid who's 6 who's drawing with crayons. And sometimes you get someone from a kid who's 13 and has got like a really cool, really like well drawn, Corvette or something like that. So it's kind of fun for us to see that age range and so many different kids finding, relating to it. So it's cool.
Yeah, the range is super interesting for me to watch, right? They have different questions and they kind of engage with it differently. And there's different sections of the content that I think make sense for them. The 4-year-old's obviously not reading anything that you wrote.
Yeah.
Sorry to announce to you, but
Come
but
on.
is tearing her favorite page out and is like, it's like, her coloring sheet or whatever it is.
Yeah, that's great.
But it's really neat. I mean, I see, I'm obviously in the car world, and so my kids see like weirdo cars in our driveway, and I'm always running off to the next event, and my computer screen always has a car on it that I'm doing on BAT or somewhere else, so it's a little bit normalized for them.
Right.
But the I hate to say it, but like intelligent conversation about cars doesn't always just kind of come naturally. Like the Kickstarter component of what you guys put together it's really neat. Like there's one of the favorite pages of my 8-year-old daughter is like, on one side you'll have this list of cars, and then on the other side you'll have like match them to their nationality or something.
Right. Yeah.
And she's like, okay, a Jaguar, is that, where's that from? Or what's the origin of all this stuff? And I mean, I have to look back at my own history, and I'm sure when I was 6 or 7 or 8, that's what I was asking my dad, or I was reading weirdo car magazines trying to figure that stuff out too, right? So anyway, it's just a super cool sort of extending of the mind and the conversation for all of them.
That's awesome.
Can
I ask you a question about when you've got these kind of like weirdo cars, as you say, parked in the driveway? Are your kids like psyched to be able to go to soccer practice in one of those cars, or are they like embarrassed because it's attracting attention?
A little bit of both. Kind of depends on what the car is. They have a couple of favorites each that they always like beg me to bring home, and we can go for a ride in and that sort of stuff. They love washing the cars. Interestingly, that's maybe like one of their favorite activities.
Cool.
Even more than riding in them, because that's sort of a water park experience. And they no, but they love it. They think it's awkward and weird when somebody like at a restaurant or whatever walks up
Yes.
and it like wants to talk about my car or whatever. They're like, Dad, you and these people are super weird. Like, what are you doing? And that comes out more as they get a little bit older, right? Fourth and fifth graders are just like confused and don't really understand or process. But my 11-year-old boy is starting to get a little bit of the like, okay, here's another guy that wants to buy your pickup truck. Like, why are we having this conversation again? Which is really, it's super funny. And again, I think I'm an unusual example because it's kind of my business and everything about what I do and what I talk about and how I spend my free time. But for most listeners out there, I presume they're into VAT, they're into cars. They obviously, maybe they share that with their kids or young people or not, but they also have a normal life outside of that. I'm less well-rounded, you know?
That's great. I got to test drive a Lamborghini Urus. Urus, am I saying that right?
I don't even know how to say it, but yeah. Sounds good.
Sounds good. For a week, and my kids were definitely split on it. You know, one of them loved it, so awesome, just loved the roar of it, and the other was just like hiding in the back seat because he's like, I don't want anyone to see me in this.
That's funny. So but let's touch on that and let's go a little deeper on that. Like why are you doing this? Do you have a passion for doing things for kids overall, and you've done other content in other lifetimes and career stops for you to do that? Or is this or are you more of a car guy that's now figuring out the kid component? Or what brings you to this to be the leader of this effort?
Yeah, so I guess what probably the way in for me is that I've worked at places like Maxim Magazine, or I worked at Jimmy Kimmel Live for a while. I've always liked things that kind of have a sense of humor and, don't take, one point for anyone who's going to be a podcast guest, don't chug seltzer while you're talking, because you'll have to keep not burping every 5 seconds. But so I've always approached it. I come into it from more of a just sort of like curiosity about like cool, fun, like interesting things, trying to have a sense of humor about it, telling jokes. And I'm just like, I guess I'm just curious about a lot of stuff. Like, when we were talking about like, what is a V8 or what is a V12, like really like digging into it and just understanding what that actually means and why is that thing such a beast and why is that thing not a beast at all. So I think in that respect, it makes me kind of qualified, as you said, to write for 10-year-olds who don't really know a lot of this stuff either. And, and I get to pick the brains of my kids a little bit. As you said, they're a little bit older, but they're not like total car nerds. So I get to kind of pick their brains a little bit and just like ask them questions like, hey, what do you think of this? Or do you know why that does that? And most of the times they say no. So that's a good sort of jumping off point for me. And in terms of the stuff that we do in the box, like we'll even do, we'll put a yo-yo in there, but we'll and it'll be branded R&T Crew, but then we'll put a card that says like, how does a yo-yo work? Like, what are the physics behind, why is this thing actually working? So a lot of that stuff, it's really fun to talk to like experts who know about this thing and then try to distill it down to a really simple explanation that, an 8-year-old can understand. If an 8-year-old can understand it, then maybe I can understand it too. So that's where I really love to do it.
Yeah, well, I like the level of the description. Yeah, I saw the yo-yo thing. My kids were swinging that thing around the house for a good while when it showed up.
It quickly becomes a weapon.
Totally, which was pretty funny. But yeah, obviously, what was formerly STEM and now STEAM, they call it, because they've added art, right? Science, technology, math, engineering, and arts, all whatever jumbled up there in a word search. That sort of aspect, I can see how that's sort of a through line in the content in the magazine, in the stuff that's included in the box. There was like a beaker of some sort, showed you how to measure things in a graduated cylinder and that sort of stuff. That sort of topic obviously is a hot button topic right now for kids, both in school and in sort of extracurricular stuff. Other boxes, so we have boxes come to the house all the time, which is awesome, right? Building things, wood shop things. There's all sorts of thematic boxes you can get in the mail for kids or adults, like I mentioned. But STEM and STEAM type topics obviously are important. Is that something that was a thought for this automotive type content right off the bat, or was that something sort of added later?
Yeah. Right out of the gate, the folks who kind of put this all together, that was an important thing for them to have included. And excuse me. And what is interesting is so I get to talk to, yesterday I talked to, here's a sneak peek, a guy who's a stunt driver in movies. And he's talking about, what it takes behind the scenes to get that car to flip, on cue in the right spot. And there's a lot of physics involved, how the ramp is curved, how fast the car is going. There's a lot of like math that goes behind sort of figuring things out. Or I've talked to a guy who designed the Batmobile for the 1989 reboot, and his thinking of, I got to make it look cool, but it also has to work. So many people who are doing these like super interesting, cool jobs, like it kind of comes down to, they had to like learn some science, they have to learn some math, and they all talk about how they were so into this as a kid, and they were just like scrambling to find anything to like feed that passion. So what's the cool thing is we can kind of put that all in a box for kids who are into this stuff and like kind of put it on their front door, so they don't have to scramble around and dig around and try to find stuff. Like it comes to them every 2 months. So that's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's cool. I love that, man. Stunt drivers. I'm looking for that issue that's going to come out. I'm going to be the first to grab that one. I want to see what people are blowing up and rolling cars and how. Oh man, there's so many questions around that sort of topic. And
I know that guy, I had him on the phone. I was like, yeah, it'll be 15 minutes, like an hour later. And then like, so then what happens when you, and he's like, I really have to go.
Yeah.
No, he was a lot of fun, but so many interesting things. Just one of the things was, he was talking about, the stunt. You see this in the movie and it looks like they're driving like 1,000,000 miles per hour. But he said often when they're doing a flip, a car flip, they might be driving like tops 30 miles per hour. It's all about like, again, it's all about all these like mathematical calculations and obviously just the experience and the way they edit things together. But he said, in these car chases, usually we're driving about 30, 40 miles per hour tops. But it looks like they're like flying down, Fifth Avenue. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I love it. So yeah, I mean, a lot of times when this thing shows up in the mail, it makes me think about like, what got me into cars? Why am I here where I am? Right. Like I think scale cars, building models, obviously, Hot Wheel, Matchbox, Siku is my favorite brand of little cars, and I still have those all scattered around my office here just because I love that. The trading cards that you guys include, there's like 6 of them that come each time, and it's like a cool road and track photo on the front, and then your make, model, and then like stats on the back, like a ball player would have, right? Like all the stats of the car and that sort of stuff. We're creating quite a pile of those on a couple of the tables and desks in our place. And anyhow, just the things that resonate with me and are similar to mine. I think sometimes I want to recreate and like they'll like cars because it's exactly how it was for me. But actually the world has come a long way. Like in their classes now in school, there's this whole genre, which you probably know, which is called graphic novels, right? Like if you and I had comic books in school, like that was considered terrible and a distraction and like super off limits, right? Like you weren't allowed to have comic books in class. You get busted.
Yeah, no way. No way.
Nowadays, like in the curriculum, and like when he's doing his reading pages at school, both my son and daughter are doing that. And in their school library, there's this whole like shelves and shelves of graphic novels, which I kind of think like they're like glorified comic books, right? I mean, they're like drawn cartoon with speech bubbles and people talking to each other and all that sort of stuff, right? So it's super interesting how that's adopted and accepted and how times have changed. And I see a lot of that sort of graphical presentation in the magazine that you guys have, which is right on point for them. Is that, I'm sure you guys have like a bunch of artists, or maybe one artist or a bunch of creative artist types that put all that stuff together, or who does all that stuff?
Yeah, so we have an art director, Elena, who does an amazing job of sort of putting everything together. We have one artist who's been doing a lot of our covers, who just does like a phenomenal job of making the stuff. It looks like the car we're talking about, but it's cartoonish, so it's inviting to kids. And the one thing sort of what you were mentioning with the trading cards and stuff is we kind of try to strike a balance between vintage cars that like dad is going to try to steal that card away from his son when it comes in the mail, to the new Bugatti that can drive 8 million miles per hour. So just sort of balancing that out. And obviously we're getting into a weird time where you're like, hey, are the kids reading this magazine going to drive a car? Or are they gonna sit in a car that takes them somewhere? So it's a really kind of fascinating time period where things are just changing so much so fast. So it's really been interesting to kind of be writing about all this kind of stuff as it's unfolding.
Yeah. Oh, that's super interesting to think about. Yeah. Sometimes you get into the, autopilot world and people are all predicting like none of us are going to drive anything and that sort of stuff. I tend to take a sort of longer time frame approach on that. I don't think that's going to be for a while. And I was super encouraged recently to hear my kids say like, hey, what are you super excited about when you become an adult? And the two older ones immediately were like, I can't wait to drive a car. I want to drive, and I was like, right, a little fist pump, like behind the scenes. I'm like, right on. That's a good answer. So, I think mine may be an unusual sample, but I think that it's good to see out there that there's still going to be excitement around that. And you and I aren't gone yet, man. I mean, I'm 44 next week. Right. And hopefully I got another good, 20 or 30 years of shifting a manual transmission and a left foot that can still push a clutch pedal. So I think there's some good decades in front of us. Around what we're going to be doing. And I don't think that's going to go away right off.
No, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, you're probably in a slightly different situation than a lot of people, but I remember, when I was a kid, and my grandfather working on his like VW Bug and just like having the thing open and like handing him tools as he was doing things, like he didn't require a computer or, a science degree to do anything. He was just went to the auto parts store and bought the thing he needed and he put it on his engine, so it was kind of cool to have been, being able to be a part of that, because that's a rare and rarer thing these days for sure.
Yeah, I think so too. But in this audience, you're kind of preaching to the choir in this audience, right? Everybody who's listed here is into that and invigorated by that and has stories like that, right? And for me at least, there's some, I wouldn't say it's a pressure, but there's some at least desire that I have to pass that down to kids so they kind of know how to do some things, and there's some self-sufficiency, and there's some all the big push for like less screen time, staring at their video games or whatever.
Absolutely.
Right, they can actually turn a Phillips head screw and figure out how to do it. So I place some value in that, and I think some other people place some value in that. And so it's funny, a few weeks ago we had a guest on who is like running basically a college age, university age program to like help people learn how to work on cars and do that sort of thing. And that was almost considered like an effort for youth, right? But I mean, that's 10 and 15 years older than the target demo that we're talking about, right? Like, I mean, your stuff is almost as early as you can get. I mean, unless you're making like baby toys for like chew toys shaped in cars or something, maybe that's even younger. But like yours is actually starting to engage the brain. The first time we can start to engage their brain and excitement around automotive topics. And that's, I mean, I think it's super exciting and interesting and cool. And that's why I say it's really amazing that there's not that many other touch points at that age group unless we're talking library books and storytelling type stuff.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm glad to hear you say that, because the other thing is anyone who's has kids who has tried to get one of your children to listen to music that you like, and they will automatically reject it even though they would love it. There's no chance they're gonna. So rather than like handing your son or daughter a copy of Road and Track magazine and hoping that it connects with them, it's sort of like a lower entry point where they can kind of discover it on their own and play some games with it, and kind of find out what part of all this that they're really interested in, and just sort of build off of that. So that's been a big part of what we're trying to do.
Cool. Super cool. Can we tell folks, you gave a couple secrets from the topics that are maybe coming up, but any other things that are coming up or things you're excited about that are in the pipeline?
Yeah, well, so for anyone who has been listening and this sounds cool, like obviously you can subscribe to it, but we've been at this for a little while now, and I'm kind of psyched that in the spring we're gonna have a book come out that you'll be able to buy kind of anywhere, on Amazon and all those kinds of places. But it is going to collect a lot of the stuff we've done in the past that I've mentioned. There's going to be a whole bunch of new stuff. So, if you're kind of just hearing about this magazine now, you can sort of catch up with a lot of the fun stuff that we've done in the past. Like I said, Guy Fieri gave us a pretty cool interview. And just all these interesting people who have like interesting jobs. And then coming up, we've got the next issue that people would be able to get is probably the future issue. So that should have some really fun, awesome stuff. And it's sort of like the real future and also the future of the past. So like in 1952, what did concept cars look like? What did they think was which direction did they think things were going? And it's pretty amazing, some of the stuff that you realize, like rear cameras, have been around for a very long time. There's not what we know of today, but there's all these kind of innovations that started a really long time ago that just sort of catching up to now, like electric cars. Electric cars have been around for a really long time. It's just sort of like the technology has caught up now that they can mass produce them. So all that kind of stuff is a lot of fun.
Cool. The book sounds super interesting because if you missed out on some of those older ones, I don't think there's a mechanism to like buy back issues of the boxes, right? Like the book is the way to get the old stuff.
That'll be the best way to do it. But you know what? Email us. Go to the website. Email us. I'm sure we could figure something out. If there's an issue that you really really want to check out, let us know. We'll figure something out.
Okay, fantastic. Super cool. So, R&T Crew obviously is the name of it. And you can Google that. You can find links to that. You can find links to it off of the Road and Track page and different things like that. And this is just one of the things that I've been super pleasantly surprised about. We've been with Hearst linked up with the larger company for a little over a year now. And this is just one initiative that the people doing it are stoked. The readers get just a really neat item, and yeah, seeing my personal experience with it with kids just fires me up. So anyway, really appreciate your time today, Dan. Super fun to talk to sort of the man behind the scenes, and I will keep pumping you for details for what's coming in the future, because that's what we're watching our mailboxes for. And I just really appreciate it. Like, it's obviously it's a career and a cool path for you, but also I really think it's serving a purpose, and it's doing something useful and positive in a way that, a lot of car stuff, it can be sort of frivolous, right? But doing something for kids and engaging with them in that way, I think is admirable and something you should be proud of.
Oh man, well, thank you. That's really kind of you. I appreciate it. Appreciate being on here. And I've talked to you before. I love what you're doing. It's very cool. And we touched on this, but anything that we can do that doesn't involve us staring at a screen, I think is better for society at large and for ourselves. So I think getting under the hood and messing around, just getting out there with your car, talking to other people who are into cars. It's such a awesome community of people coming together and just talking about their passions and just having fun at the same time. So really, really excited to be on this. So thanks so much.
Cool. Thanks, Dan. All right, everybody. Hope you can go check it out and take a look. And if you have young people in your life, maybe see if it is something that would fire them up. And we'll be back next week with some more fun topics and guests. So thanks for joining us this time.